With a £50,000 Plan 2 student loan at today's current max interest rate of 6.2%, you'd need to earn £63,000 to actually start paying down the balance. And even then, you're only reducing your true debt by around £7 per year. I don't know about you, but I'd rather have a pint of Guinness with that instead. On this salary, it'll take you over 6,000 years to pay off the debt. Unless you freeze yourself like Walt Disney, you'll be long dead before then. And of course, most student loans get written off after a certain number of years. There is some assumptions here, the biggest one being your salary is static, which obviously won't happen in real life. But on this £63,000 salary, this means you'll be paying this graduate tax for most of your working life, over 93,000 in repayments. Although it is legally still a loan, it really operates more like a tax. In this video, we're going to be going into the maths, including when you actually start reducing the size of your student loan and when you should consider overpaying. You've probably seen that student loans are back in the news, especially Plan 2 student loans, and for the right reasons. To put it bluntly, the system is flawed, especially when the architect of the plan has come out and said the system was designed in a mad rush. I mean, surely you don't admit this. But anyway, I'm not going to hash that out now. In this video, we're just going to be looking at the maths. What we're going to look at applies specifically to Plan 2 student loans, which usually apply to people who started university in England between 2012 and 2023. Although, as you can see, there are rough similarities between the various plans. Let me take you into my sheets. Bit weird. Not sure if that's YouTube friendly. If you're on a student loan or you just want to know more information, this video will be helpful for you. And this is the spreadsheet that I pulled together. The yellow highlights at the top here are the inputs, and it then essentially spits out some numbers based on those inputs. In this example, we have a student loan balance of 50k and a salary of £63,000. As you can see on that student loan balance, the break-even salary, which essentially means we actually start reducing the size of your loan, is around that £63,000 mark. It means your effective graduate tax, and this is the formula here, is around 5%. However, because you're at that break-even point, you never actually repay the loan, and there's a full amortization schedule down here, but you essentially pay the loan back for 30 years and you essentially end up with a similar balance at the end than what you started, but of course you made repayments every month and every year along the way. If I then change this to say a 40k income, and now there's actually a net increase each year because you're not earning enough money to actually pay down the loan. If I then change this to say a £75,000 income, the reverse happens and you now are paying down the loan by a decent amount each year, and you actually repay the loan in 23 years. And you can see in this schedule from year 23 onwards, there's no further payments because you've cleared the loan. The interest rates for most plans are generally in line with inflation, except for the post-grad plan and for Plan 2 student loans, where the more you earn, the higher your interest rate is up to a point. This rate, the top rate being 6.2%, is much higher than inflation. Historically, long-term real stock market returns have averaged around this interest rate, and that's going to play a factor when we come on to discussing shortly whether you should overpay your student loan. But this is ultimately why, even as you start earning more money, it's hard to reduce the size of the debt just because the interest rate is so high and the interest rate increases with your earnings. If anyone would like this spreadsheet and be interested in using the spreadsheet, drop me an email. I'll put my email on the screen and I can send it over to you if you want to have a play around with your own numbers. Let's now look at this in a bit more detail. So for a £50,000 student loan here, the break-even salary is around £63,000. Now, what this means is you are technically paying down the loan each year, however, by such a small amount. So you effectively pay this graduate tax for the full 30 years. In terms of your repayments, you actually end up paying £93,000 roughly in repayments over the loan term. Let's say you earn less, around £40,000. Firstly, the interest rate drops to 4.7%. You can see now all of this turns red because your loan balance is actually growing. You started with £50,000 and the ending balance when it actually gets written off is nearly tripled to £133,000. Along the way, you made repayments each year, but they've only totaled around £31,000 in total. So you had a 50k loan, it's ended up at over 100K, 133K to be exact, but you've only paid 31K in repayments towards the loan because of your salary. If you earn more now, let's say £55,000, and once again, keeping the student loan balance the same, you once again will never pay off the loan in a 30-year period, but you'll make much higher repayments over the years, over the 30 years, at over £70,000. You probably know where I'm going with this, but one more example, and we've increased the salary now to £75,000. And in this example, you actually will pay off the loan within 23 years. And across that time, you paid roughly £100,000 in repayments. What I've been trying to get at here is it really is those salaries between 50 and 70K where there's the mid squeeze. You repay quite a lot, particularly over the loan term, but never really enough to completely clear the debt whilst being charged the maximum interest or near the maximum interest along the way. And the system, how it's currently set up, squeezes those hardest in the middle. Of course, the main sort of downside of this calculation is that it's static. We've assumed a fixed salary over time, but hopefully you can see where I'm getting at. The brutal thing is also at this income level, you just pass into the higher rate band. So your marginal tax rate, including income tax and national insurance, is 51% on every £1 you earn. And this often impacts people in their 20s and 30s who are juggling other goals like trying to save for a home and investing for the long term. Of course, this is a static calculation and there are some assumptions built in. I've listed the main limitations here on the right. I just wanted to be upfront about this. The main limitation is assuming that static salary, therefore the repayments are fixed down here, whereas in reality, your salary is likely to slowly increase over time. And so far, we've been assuming a £50,000 student loan, whereas if we change that number, of course, the numbers that this calculation spits out changes as well. But in general, as your loan increases, the numbers get worse. As your loan increases, you need to earn more to actually start reducing down the debt. And on a 50K loan, it's around a £75,000 salary where you more meaningfully start paying down the loan. As another example, if we increase the student loan balance to say £60,000, you can see on the £75,000 salary, you actually once again don't pay it off. On a £60,000 loan, you'd really would need to earn around £85,000 to once again more meaningfully pay off the loan. And at these high salary amounts, such a small percentage of the country actually earns these salaries. That is the maths. Unfortunately, as you can see, it is a bit crippling. The next question is, when should you start considering whether it's worth to overpay? It really depends on your income and your student loan balance. Coming back to assuming a £50,000 loan, it's around the break-even point, I would say, of a salary of around £63,000, where it could be worth considering overpayments. The reason being is that on this income, you're just about paying down the debt each year. And although you won't repay the loan, let's just say I overwrite the repayments per year to £4,100. So that's assuming you can repay an extra £1,000 per year or £83 per month, then you actually repay the loan within 24 years. But this is the slightly bizarre thing. If you don't overpay, so you never clear the loan, in this example on this break-even salary, over the 30 years, you essentially repay £93,000. However, if we do assume an overpayment of 1K per year roughly, even though you clear the loan after 24 years, your total repayments over that time are actually around, if I sum this properly and don't do that, your actual repayments are around £96,000. So you're actually paying more to clear the loan early. On a higher salary comes a bit more clear cut. So let's do it on a £75,000 salary. On this £75,000 salary, you will repay the loan within 23 years. And across those 23 years, your total repayments will be around £93,000. Let's now say you can once again overpay an extra 1K per year, which is roughly £83 per month. If we hard code this number to 5,200, you'll first of all cut 7 years off your repayment time down to 16 years. And it means your total repayment will be around £78,000. So on this salary now, and with this overpayment, you've actually both reduced your years of repayment and also your total repayment across the loan period. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, you can repay £2,000 towards your student loan each year. If we manually overwrite this again here, it cuts another 4 years off of your loan down to 12 years, and the total amount you've repaid once again falls slightly to £71,000 in total across the loan period. Can you afford to do this? Is this the best use of your money? That's the difficult thing to work out, and it will be different for each person. It does depend on your student loan balance, but hopefully this helps to illustrate that there probably is a certain salary level, in this example, around 70, 75K, where it could be worth overpaying to both pay off the loan or repay it quicker and make less repayments in total over the loan term. However, it is worth saying that for many people, by the time you get to earning these higher levels of income, your loan may have already ballooned. Let's say your loan had increased to £70,000 due to the high interest rate. Then on this £75,000 salary, which we just said is good to overpay, you once again no longer pay off the student loan. And it actually once again ends up bigger than when it started. Just to point out again, I appreciate this calculation and all of these examples are a little bit static and it can be hard to model, but roughly on a 70K loan here, you would need to earn around £90,000 to meaningfully pay off the loan and consider overpaying. And that's the reality for most. By the time you're on a higher income, you might have been working for a decade plus and paying at higher rates of interest for a decade plus, so your actual loan balance may have ballooned. Okay, so given all this, who should consider overpaying? I think ultimately you need to run the numbers for your personal situation. There's no one size fits all approach. It really depends on your current salary and future expected salary, as well as your current student loan balance and the growth on that balance. If you're going to be earning a high salary relatively young before your loan has ballooned too much, then it's definitely worth considering, especially if that salary based on this modeling will be £70,000 plus. Or if you're going to get to an income level where you actually start reducing the size of your loan and that income level is likely to be sustained or keep increasing over time, then once again, it's definitely worth considering too. We have been assuming a £50,000 loan balance for most of these examples, but in general, if you're on a high salary and your loan balance is small or reducing, then it once again becomes more tempting to overpay it to get it paid off. You might be able to, with some of these large overpayments, be able to clear it in under a decade, which in the grand scheme of things in your life, if that is possible, isn't too bad. However, there is one big risk. You fall ill, you start a business, something causes your income to fall drastically. Then the money you've overpaid could potentially become dead money. Of course, your student loan debt will be lower, so the absolute interest amount that's growing and your repayment amounts will also be lower, but it's not ideal. And this is best illustrated through an example. Let's say once again, you were earning £65,000 and your salary was £50,000. You were overpaying by 1K per year. So I'm going to increase this manually by 1K. In this example, it will take you 22 years roughly to completely pay off that student loan. And let's just say though, after 11 years, you have around 32,000 on your loan left, your income falls by 50% and you stop overpaying. So I'm going to reduce this repayment number here. So once again, it's formula driven and there's no overpayment. I'm then going to reduce your student loan balance to roughly £31,000, which it would have been had you repaid by roughly £1,000 over that 11 or 12-year period. But then your income is also going to get cut in half for whatever reason. And you can see once again, you don't pay off the loan and you continue paying it for the rest of that loan term. Although the repayments are much smaller now, you're still making these required repayments each year for the remainder of the 30-year period, and ultimately, unfortunately, never pay off the loan. So 11, 12 years of overpayments before that, an extra 11 or £12,000 is sort of a bit like dead money. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration. And once again, there is assumption built in. This calculation is static, but it's money you potentially shouldn't have used to overpay. And that's one of the biggest risks, is that life, as you know, is uncertain. You might have years of overpayments and then get made redundant. Another question: if you receive a lump sum, a windfall, an inheritance, should you pay off your student loan? For most people, the answer is no, but for some high earners, the answers may be yes. And it comes back to the same question. It depends on whether you were likely to repay it anyway, based on your income and student loan balance. The core principle really is, will I repay my loan before it gets written off? If not, then it's probably not worth using the lump sum to overpay your student loan, especially if the lump sum doesn't pay off the loan in one hit. But once again, like anything, there is an opportunity cost of using this money to pay off your student loan. But if you are paying 6.2% in interest, and you will be for 30 years, then I'd say if you could use a lump sum to pay it off in one hit, then it might not be a bad shout. But once again, and I'm sorry to keep caveating this, but I feel like I need to because it is very situational. And annoyingly, the system can change at any point, which brings me on to how can the system be improved? The big one, and this is bold, but remove the interest altogether, or at least have it in line with inflation rather than charging a markup. This isn't favored by the government because ultimately it means they collect less in repayments from those middle earners, but it does mean more people will actually pay off their student loans. And by not charging that markup, that very high rate of interest seems a bit fairer, at least to me personally. The interest is charged on an upward spike, where as you earn more, you pay more interest, which is why it's just so hard to pay down the loan. And I do think it should just be a flat rate, whatever that rate is, like for most of the other student loan plans. You're also charged the maximum rate of interest while studying, which once again just seems brutal and very unfair, and why the loan balance balloons even whilst you're studying. Other than interest, the system should increase the repayment threshold here on the right in line with inflation. Now, this actually is increasing to £29,385 from April 2026, but then it's frozen until April 2030, which is unfortunately another stealth tax and another piece of fiscal drag. Finally, and most importantly, I'd say better upfront education for potential students to know what they're getting into, and for parents too, because the students at the time might want to listen. I probably wouldn't have. So at least educate the parents so the students, the parents, the families know what they're getting into. Although uni is great and there's so many benefits, when you show these numbers, and I'm sure the government or an expert can model it down to the penny and with changing salaries over time based on the career you want to go into, it might prevent students going to uni for the sake of it, to then be saddled with this graduate tax, which works out to be an effective tax rate of at the worst around 6% over their working life. There isn't, of course, one perfect solution because every change and suggestion shifts the costs between graduates and taxpayers. But I think those ideas are clear areas where the system could be a bit simpler and fairer. Now, I don't think cancelling student loans is the right option. I actually feel like most people want to pay off their student loan, especially the people that I've spoken to. There's a sense of pride in doing that. You've been lucky to go to uni, you've probably had a good time, you've got a job and you want to pay this money back, but the system is currently demotivating and a bit demoralizing. It honestly feels a bit like setting money on fire each month, as you're just chucking hundreds of pounds, maybe thousands of pounds per year into a debt that is growing each month and that isn't being reduced. And it's often, as we mentioned earlier, when this money is needed most and could be better used in your 20s and 30s for buying a house, putting into a pension, spent in the economy. This is a political issue, and I have tried my best to keep politics out of it. Whilst the current chancellor is taking the brunt of the stick, it was previous governments that introduced this system, and when the system was introduced, inflation was very low. I mean, it's also worth saying there's 650 MPs and the average age is around 50, which means many went to university before today's student loan system existed. And relatively few MPs are likely to have these Plan 2 student loans and be experiencing these problems personally, which may explain why the system isn't really that understood and why there's a lack of urgency to fix the system, as selfishly it just doesn't directly impact them. I do want to say just one more time that I know my spreadsheet is a bit static. I know there's an opportunity cost with overpaying your loans. I know all of this is situational and based on so many factors, some of which are out of our control, but hopefully this video has been helpful to present the issue in a relatively fair way, looking at the numbers. Ultimately, and the conclusion is, the system squeezes hardest in the middle. High earners have more chance of clearing it and potentially should overpay. Low earners barely repay at all, but middle earners can pay the most for 30 years without ever actually paying off the loan, and the loan could be 2 to 3 times bigger by the time it's written off. And the lucky ones are those either who went to uni before tuition fees tripled in 2012, or went to uni where there were no tuition fees at all, or those who didn't have to take on a student loan because their families were able to afford to cover university costs. Let me know what you think of all of this in the comments below. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I mean, what would you do if you were in government? And if you're currently earning around £50,000 or will be soon, which is when you start paying the highest rate of interest on your Plan to student loan, then watch this video here next where I go through the 9 things that you need to do at this income level to make your money go further.